Get your bag and move to the back where you belong. Karen Mitchell's manicured hand shoved Dr. James Carter's shoulder as he settled into seat 2A. The entire first-class cabin fell silent. Phones emerged from designer handbags. 20 passengers watched the confrontation unfold. Nobody knew they were about to witness the downfall of a corporate executive, and the rise of a movement that would change airline policy forever. Atlanta's Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport hummed with the organized chaos of Friday afternoon travel. Gate B-17 buzzed with passengers eager to board Flight 847 to Los Angeles. The massive Boeing 777 sat gleaming on the tarmac, promising 6 hours of cross-country travel. Dr. James Carter stood in boarding group 1, his phone displaying a pristine first-class boarding pass. Seat 2A. Aisle. He'd purchased the ticket 3 weeks ago using his own funds, $1, $247.80 that represented careful saving and deliberate planning. James was 42 years old, distinguished despite his casual travel attire. He wore a navy blue crewneck sweater, well-fitted dark jeans, and immaculate white sneakers. His leather messenger bag, worn but quality, hung across his shoulder. Nothing about his appearance suggested anything other than a professional traveling comfortably. His face carried the kind of quiet intelligence that came from decades of observation. Deep brown eyes that noticed everything. A slight beard, neatly trimmed. Posture that suggested both confidence and caution, the stance of someone who'd learned to navigate hostile spaces without drawing unnecessary attention. The gate agent scanned his boarding pass with a cheerful beep. "Welcome aboard, Mr. Carter. Enjoy your flight." James nodded politely and proceeded down the jet bridge. The familiar smell of recycled air and cleaning solution greeted him as he entered the aircraft. Flight attendant Derek Sullivan stood at the entrance, his smile professional and practiced. "Good afternoon, sir. First class is to your right." James turned right into the spacious first-class cabin. 8 rows of wide leather seats arranged in a 1-2-1 configuration. Mood lighting cast everything in a soft blue glow. The carpet was thick and pristine. This was the premium experience that airlines marketed relentlessly, the space where comfort met exclusivity. Seat 2A was easy to locate. Aisle seat, second row, left side of the aircraft. James lifted his messenger bag toward the overhead compartment. That's when he heard the voice. "Excuse me, flight attendant." The tone was sharp, entitled, designed to command immediate attention. "There's been some kind of mistake. This man is in first class." James turned slightly. The woman in seat 2B, the window seat directly beside his, was already half standing, her face contorted with indignation. She appeared to be in her mid-50s, with platinum blonde hair styled in an expensive cut that screamed country club membership. Designer glasses. Cream-colored blazer over a silk blouse. Jewelry that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. Her name, as James would soon learn, was Karen Mitchell. Senior Vice President of Operations at Thornton Consulting Group. Corporate executive. Frequent flyer. Woman accustomed to getting exactly what she wanted, exactly when she wanted it. Derek approached with practiced neutrality, his face betraying nothing. "Is there a problem, ma'am?" "Yes, there's a problem." Karen gestured at James as if he were an unexpected package delivered to the wrong address. "This man is trying to sit in first class. There's obviously been some sort of error with the ticketing system." Other passengers had begun filtering into the cabin. A businessman in a charcoal suit paused mid-stride, sensing drama. A woman with oversized headphones pretended not to notice while clearly listening to every word. 2 teenagers in matching prep school uniforms exchanged knowing glances. "Sir, may I see your boarding pass?" Derek asked, extending his hand toward James. James reached into his pocket with deliberate calm. His movements were measured, controlled. No sudden gestures. No aggressive posturing. Just the careful precision of someone who'd learned that black men couldn't afford to appear threatening, even when being threatened themselves. He handed over his phone, boarding pass displayed clearly on the screen. Derek examined it carefully. This is seat 2A, sir. You're in the correct seat. Karen's face flushed from cream to pink to crimson. That's impossible. Check again. There must be some kind of error. He obviously doesn't belong here. The phrase hung in the air like smoke from a fired gun. Obviously doesn't belong here. James felt the familiar weight settle over his shoulders. 20 years of these moments. 20 years of people questioning his presence in spaces they considered their exclusive territory. Conference rooms. University halls. Country clubs. Golf courses. And now, apparently, first-class airplane cabins. Ma'am, his ticket is completely valid, Derek repeated, his voice still professional but now carrying a slight edge of discomfort. Then check how he purchased it, Karen insisted, her voice rising in volume. Did he use miles? Because sometimes people game the system with these credit card points schemes. They accumulate miles they didn't really earn and then they upgrade themselves into spaces reserved for actual paying customers. James finally spoke. His voice was quiet, controlled, carrying the kind of authority that came from years of commanding rooms without raising his volume. I purchased this ticket with a credit card. Full fare. 3 weeks ago. Karen's eyes narrowed. You paid full price? For first class? On this route? The skepticism in her voice could have cut glass. Yes, James replied simply. I find that very hard to believe, Karen said, crossing her arms. She turned back to Derek. I want you to verify this. Call your supervisor. Check the payment method. Something is wrong here. More passengers had filed into the cabin. Seat 1C now held a silver-haired businessman who was trying very hard to look like he wasn't paying attention. Seat 3A had a young woman in yoga pants and a designer sweatshirt, her eyes wide as she recorded the scene on her phone held low and discreet. Behind them in seats 4A and 4B, an elderly couple exchanged worried glances but said nothing. Derek's professional mask was beginning to crack. Ma'am, I've confirmed his ticket is legitimate. Is there another issue I can help you with? The issue, Karen said, her voice dripping with condescension, is that I paid full price for this seat. I have status with this airline. I fly this route every single week for business. I have accumulated 2 million miles over the past decade. And I have certain expectations about the first-class experience. I understand you're a valued customer, Derek began. Then you understand that I will not sit next to, Karen paused, her eyes scanning James from head to toe, taking in his casual attire, his messenger bag, his sneakers, someone who clearly doesn't meet first-class standards. The cabin fell completely silent. The businessman in 1C suddenly found his Wall Street Journal fascinating. The yoga pants woman's phone was definitely recording now. The elderly couple in row 4 looked like they wanted to disappear into their leather seats. James stood perfectly still. His breathing remained controlled. His hands stayed relaxed at his sides. Every instinct screamed at him to respond, to defend himself, to call out the obvious racism dripping from Karen's carefully coded language. But he'd learned the rules of this game long ago. Respond with anger, and you become the aggressive black man. Defend yourself too forcefully, and you're threatening. Show any emotion whatsoever, and you prove their point that you don't belong in civilized spaces. So James said nothing. He simply stood there, his silence more powerful than any words could be. Derek pressed his call button. I'm getting my supervisor. Karen nodded with satisfaction, settling back into her window seat like a queen waiting for her servants to resolve an unpleasant situation. She pulled out her phone, the latest iPhone Pro Max in a leather case that probably cost $200, and began typing furiously. James could see the screen from his angle. She was texting someone, "You won't believe what I'm dealing with right now. They're trying to seat some thug next to me in first class. About to get him removed. This airline has gone completely downhill." 60 seconds passed in uncomfortable silence. 90 seconds. 2 minutes. Other passengers continued boarding. Row 5 filled with a family of 4, parents and 2 young children who immediately sensed the tension and fell quiet. Row 6 received a couple who looked like they were heading to a wedding, the woman's garment bag carefully placed in the overhead compartment. Every new arrival sensed something was wrong. The atmosphere in the first-class cabin felt charged, electric, dangerous. Finally, senior flight attendant Michelle Torres appeared from the galley. She was in her late 40s, Latina, with the bearing of someone who'd navigated 15 years of passenger conflicts and airline politics. Her face showed professional concern. "I understand there's a seating issue." Michelle's voice was carefully neutral. Karen immediately launched into her complaint. "This man is in first class, and I don't feel comfortable sitting next to him. I've been flying with this airline for 10 years. I have Platinum Elite status. I expect a certain level of quality in first class, and this," she gestured at James again, "is not acceptable." Michelle glanced at Derek, who gave a subtle shake of his head that communicated, "The ticket is legitimate." "Ma'am, I understand your concern," Michelle said, choosing her words carefully. "However, this passenger has a valid first-class ticket. He's in his assigned seat. Unless there's a specific safety concern." "My comfort is a safety concern," Karen interrupted. "I don't feel safe sitting next to him." "That should be enough." James felt something shift inside him. The familiar anger that he usually kept locked down began stirring. Not explosive rage. Not visible fury. Just a cold, calculated anger that whispered, "Not this time. Not today." "On what grounds don't you feel safe?" Michelle asked. Karen's mouth opened and closed. She was clearly searching for a response that wouldn't sound overtly racist while still achieving her goal of having James removed. He has a certain energy," Karen finally said. "I can tell these things. I have excellent instincts about people. And my instincts are telling me that he doesn't belong in first class. Maybe he's flying on some kind of charity ticket. Maybe someone gave him miles as a gift. But real first-class passengers, people who actually earn these seats, deserve to sit with their own kind." Their own kind. The phrase echoed through the cabin like a gunshot. The businessman in 1C finally looked up from his newspaper, his face registering shock. The yoga pants woman's phone was now openly recording, not even trying to hide it anymore. The elderly couple in row 4 looked horrified. Michelle's professional mask cracked slightly. "Ma'am, I cannot and will not remove a passenger based on instincts. This gentleman has every right to be in this seat." "Then I want to speak to the pilot," Karen demanded. "And I want to be moved. Upgrade me to a different seat. Or give me extra miles. Or do something to compensate me for this completely unacceptable situation." "There are no other first-class seats available," Michelle said. "The cabin is fully booked." "Then move him," Karen said, her voice rising to a near shout. "Move him to economy. Give him a voucher or whatever. But I am not sitting next to him for 6 hours." James finally spoke again. His voice was quiet but carried an edge of steel that made everyone pause. "I have a valid ticket for the seat. I purchased it legally. I've done nothing wrong. And I'm not moving." Karen's face went from crimson to nearly purple. "Did you hear that? Did everyone hear that? He's being aggressive. He's refusing to cooperate with airline staff." "I'm exercising my right to sit in the seat I paid for," James replied calmly. "We can offer you a voucher, sir," Michelle said, her tone apologetic but firm. $500 toward a future flight, plus a complimentary upgrade on your next booking. And we'll reseat you in premium economy, which is quite comfortable." "No," James said simply. The word hung in the air. Michelle looked trapped between corporate policy and obvious injustice. She glanced toward the cockpit, clearly hoping for guidance. Karen seized the moment. "If he doesn't move, I'm getting off this plane. And I'm calling my lawyer. And the CEO of this airline happens to be a personal friend of my husband, David Mitchell. Perhaps you've heard of him? Mitchell and Associates? One of the largest law firms in Atlanta?" She paused for effect, letting the implied threat sink in. You have no idea who you're dealing with, Karen continued. I can make one phone call and have all of your jobs. Every single one of you. Is protecting him really worth your careers? The threat worked. Michelle's face showed the calculation happening behind her eyes. Passenger complaints led to corporate reviews. Corporate reviews led to performance evaluations. Performance evaluations determine promotions, bonuses, job security. One angry white woman with connections could destroy careers. One black man with a valid ticket had no such power. Michelle's shoulders sagged slightly. Sir, I really think it would be best if... I'm not moving. James's voice carried absolute finality. At that moment, the cockpit door opened. Captain Robert Hayes emerged, his presence immediately commanding attention. He was in his late 50s, with steel-gray hair and the kind of weathered face that came from 30 years of flying. His uniform was impeccable. His expression was serious. What's causing the delay? His voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed without question. Derek quickly explained the situation in hushed tones, his words barely audible to the passengers. Captain Hayes listened without interrupting. His eyes moved from Derek to Michelle to Karen to James. He was assessing, calculating, making the kind of rapid decision that pilots were trained to make under pressure. Finally, he spoke. Ma'am, he addressed Karen directly. This passenger has a valid ticket for seat 2A. If you're uncomfortable with your seat assignment, we can certainly accommodate you. There are several available seats in the main cabin. I'd be happy to have my crew assist you with your belongings. Karen's mouth fell open. Are you seriously suggesting that I move to economy? I'm offering you options, Captain Hayes said evenly. You can remain in your assigned seat beside this gentleman, or you can accept a different seat elsewhere on the aircraft. What I will not do is remove a paying passenger who has violated no rules and created no disturbance. This is discrimination. Karen shrieked. You're discriminating against me. A loyal customer. Someone who has flown hundreds of thousands of miles with this airline. With respect, ma'am, you're the one insisting that another passenger be removed based on your personal feelings, Captain Hayes replied. That's not how we operate. Karen stood abruptly, her face now a mask of rage. Fine. Fine. You want to protect him? You all want to take his side? You'll regret this. Every single one of you. She grabbed her Louis Vuitton carry-on bag from the overhead compartment with enough force to make the bin slam. Her cream-colored blazer caught on the latch, and she jerked it free with visible fury. I'm filing a formal complaint, she announced to the entire cabin. I'm contacting corporate. I'm posting about this on every social media platform. I'm calling my lawyer. And I'm making sure that everyone knows how this airline treats its valued customers. She pulled out her phone and began recording, panning across the first-class cabin. You're all witnesses, Karen said into her camera. This airline is discriminating against me. A Platinum Elite member with 2 million miles. They're refusing to accommodate my completely reasonable request because they're more concerned with appearing politically correct than actually serving the customers who keep this company in business. She turned the camera toward James. Look at this. This is who they're protecting. Someone who clearly doesn't belong in first class. Someone who probably couldn't even afford this ticket on his own. Someone who... Ma'am, I need you to stop recording and either take your seat or deplane, Captain Hayes said firmly. We have a schedule to maintain. Karen lowered her phone, her chest heaving with indignation. For a moment, James thought she might actually sit down, might actually let this go. But Karen Mitchell hadn't spent 20 years climbing corporate ladders by backing down from fights. You haven't heard the last of this, she hissed. Then she turned to the other first-class passengers. Are you all comfortable with this? With someone like him sitting among you? Because if you are, then you deserve whatever happens. The cabin remained silent. Nobody spoke up. Nobody defended James. But nobody supported Karen either. The silence itself was a statement. Karen grabbed her second bag, a matching Louis Vuitton tote, and stormed down the aisle toward economy. Her high heels clicked against the floor like gunshots. She muttered loud enough for everyone to hear, "Unbelievable. Absolutely unbelievable. This airline has completely gone to hell. Probably DI hires running everything now. No standards anymore. None whatsoever." Michelle followed her toward the back of the plane, presumably to find her a seat and prevent further disruption. The first-class cabin slowly returned to its pre-boarding routine. Passengers settled into their seats. Overhead bins closed. Carry-on bags were stowed. Seat belts clicked into place. But the atmosphere had fundamentally changed. The air felt thick, charged with unspoken thoughts and suppressed reactions. The businessman in one seat caught James's eye briefly and nodded, a small gesture that might have meant solidarity or might have meant nothing at all. The yoga pants woman gave him a thumbs up and mouthed, "I got it on video." The elderly couple in row 4 smiled sympathetically but said nothing. Everyone else carefully avoided eye contact. James finally sat down in seat 2A. The leather was soft and expensive. The armrests were wide and comfortable. The personal entertainment screen gleamed with promised distraction. This was the space he'd paid $1,247.80 to occupy. This was the comfort he'd earned through his own labor and savings. And yet, it tasted like ashes. Derek approached quietly. "Sir, I'm very sorry about that." James nodded but didn't speak. What was there to say? Sorry didn't change anything. Sorry didn't erase the humiliation. Sorry didn't address the systemic reality that his presence in first class had been treated as an intrusion rather than a right. Captain Hayes paused beside James's seat on his way back to the cockpit. "Sir, that should not have happened. I want you to know that you're welcome on this aircraft. You belong here." "Thank you," James said quietly. The captain nodded and disappeared back into the cockpit. The cabin door sealed with a pressurized hiss. The engines began their warm-up routine, a low rumble that vibrated through the aircraft frame. James stared straight ahead, his face unreadable. Inside, something had shifted. A decision had been made. A line had been crossed. 20 years. 20 years of staying calm, staying quiet, accepting humiliation as the cost of existing in spaces where people question his right to be there. Not anymore. What Karen Mitchell didn't know, what none of these passengers knew, was that Dr. James Carter wasn't just a first-class passenger. He was the reason Flight 847 existed at all. And before this plane landed in Los Angeles, every single person on board would discover exactly who they'd just tried to remove from seat 2A. The real story was about to begin. Flight 847 leveled off at cruising altitude. The seatbelt sign chimed off with a soft ding that echoed through the pressurized cabin. Flight attendants emerged from their jump seats and began preparing the first-class meal service. James Carter sat motionless in seat 2A, his eyes closed but his mind racing through calculations that had nothing to do with aerospace engineering and everything to do with justice. To everyone around him, he appeared to be resting after an exhausting confrontation. In reality, he was making decisions that would change the entire airline industry. Because what none of these passengers knew, what Karen Mitchell certainly didn't know when she demanded his removal, was that Dr. James Carter wasn't just a first-class passenger trying to get to Los Angeles. He was the reason this flight existed at all. The hidden truth. The yoga pants woman from seat 3A approached James's seat cautiously. Her phone was still in her hand, the screen dark but her expression determined. "Excuse me," she said quietly, glancing around to make sure no flight attendants were nearby. "I'm Rebecca Torres. I'm an attorney specializing in civil rights cases. I recorded that entire incident with Karen Mitchell." James opened his eyes and turned to face her. "Thank you. That's very kind of you." "It's not kindness," Rebecca said firmly. "It's evidence." What she did was textbook discrimination. The way she talked about you not belonging here, questioning how you could afford the ticket, demanding your removal based purely on her feelings. That's illegal under federal aviation regulations and civil rights law. She handed James a business card. If you want to pursue this, I'll represent you pro bono. I've handled dozens of cases like this. Airlines settle quickly when there's video evidence and multiple witnesses. James accepted the card with a slight smile. I appreciate that, Ms. Torres. Though I should tell you, I won't be needing to sue anyone. Rebecca's face fell slightly. Oh. I understand if you just want to move on. These cases can be exhausting, and I know you've already been through enough today. But I really think. You misunderstand, James interrupted gently. I'm not avoiding legal action because I'm tired. I'm avoiding it because I have a much more effective approach. Before Rebecca could respond, the businessman from seat 1C turned around in his seat. He was in his early 60s, with silver hair and the kind of expensive suit that suggested old money rather than new success. Marcus Wellington, he introduced himself, extending his hand to James. I couldn't help overhearing. That woman's behavior was absolutely disgraceful. I want you to know that I'll provide a statement if you need witnesses. I have contacts at the Department of Transportation and the FAA. One phone call and I can have investigators looking into this incident. James shook his hand. That's generous of you, Mr. Wellington. Please, call me Marcus. He paused, studying James's face with the calculating expression of someone used to reading people. You're remarkably calm for someone who was just subjected to that kind of abuse. Most people would be furious right now. Oh, I'm furious, James said quietly. I'm just strategic about my fury. The elderly couple from row 4 had been listening. The woman, who appeared to be in her 70s with perfectly styled white hair, leaned forward. Young man, my husband and I want you to know that we saw everything. We're disgusted by how you were treated. We'd be happy to provide statements, testify, whatever you need. Her husband nodded vigorously. We've been flying for 50 years. Never seen anything so blatant. That woman should be ashamed of herself. James found himself surrounded by first-class passengers who had stayed silent during the actual confrontation but were now eager to express their support. The irony wasn't lost on him. Where were these voices when Karen was demanding his removal? Where was this outrage when she was questioning his right to be in first class? Where was this solidarity when it would have actually mattered? But James understood human nature. People were brave in retrospect, courageous after the danger had passed. He didn't blame them for their silence. He'd learned long ago that expecting white allies to risk their own comfort in real time was usually futile. What mattered now was what he did with this moment. Derek, the flight attendant who had initially handled the situation, approached with the meal service cart. His face still showed discomfort from the earlier incident. Mr. Carter, I want to apologize again for what happened, Derek said quietly as he set down James's meal tray. That should never have occurred. I should have shut it down immediately instead of entertaining her complaints. You were put in an impossible position, James replied. The system is designed to protect passengers like her at the expense of passengers like me. You are following protocols that are themselves discriminatory. Derek blinked in surprise. That's exactly right. The training we receive basically tells us that complaining passengers are always right, especially high-status frequent flyers. We're taught to accommodate them, even when their complaints are, he lowered his voice further, obviously racist. What airline do you work for, Derek? James asked. Skybridge Airlines. We're operating this flight on behalf of Horizon Airways through a code-share agreement. James nodded slowly. And how long have you been with Skybridge? 8 years. I've seen situations like this more times than I can count. Passengers of color getting questioned, getting asked to move, getting treated like they don't belong in premium cabins. The company knows it happens. They just don't care enough to fix it. What if I told you, James said carefully, that I could fix it? Derek looked confused. Sir? James pulled out his phone and opened an app. He navigated to a specific screen and turned it toward Derek. It was the Horizon Airways employee portal. And James's profile showed a title that made Derek's eyes go wide. Dr. James Carter, Founder and Chief Executive Officer, Horizon Airways. Derek's mouth fell open. You own Horizon Airways? I founded it 3 years ago, James confirmed. This is one of our routes. Flight 847, Atlanta to Los Angeles. We launched it 2 months ago as part of our West Coast expansion. The color drained from Derek's face. Oh my God. Karen Mitchell tried to have you removed from your own airline's flight. She did indeed. And she has no idea. Not yet. Rebecca Torres, who had been listening to the entire exchange, let out a low whistle. This just got very interesting. Marcus Wellington was grinning like he'd just witnessed the setup for the greatest corporate takedown in aviation history. So what happens now? James looked around at the assembled passengers, the lawyer, the venture capitalist, the elderly couple, the flight attendant. All of them waiting to see what he'd do with this moment. Now, James said calmly, we document everything. Ms. Torres, I'd like to formally request a copy of your video. Mr. Wellington, I'd appreciate those DOT contacts. Derek, I need you to file an official incident report with Skybridge Airlines detailing exactly what happened, without minimizing or sanitizing Karen Mitchell's behavior. He paused, his voice taking on an edge of steel. And then I'm going to use my platform to ensure that what happened to me today never happens to another passenger again. The landing and confrontation. 6 hours later, Flight 847 touched down at Los Angeles International Airport. The landing was smooth, professional, routine. James gathered his belongings while other passengers deplaned. He waited until the cabin was mostly empty before standing up. Rebecca Torres had waited with him, as had Marcus Wellington. I'd like to see how this plays out, if you don't mind, Marcus said with a wry smile. As they walked up the jet bridge, James pulled out his phone and made a call. Lisa, it's James. I need you to do something for me immediately. Lisa Chen, his chief operating officer, answered on the first ring. James. How was the flight? Eventful. I need you to pull all the security footage from Flight 847 today, gate area, boarding, everything. Contact Skybridge Airlines and inform them that Horizon Airways is conducting an internal investigation into discriminatory treatment of passengers. I want passenger manifests, crew reports, and any complaint forms filed by Karen Mitchell. There was a pause. What happened? A passenger attempted to have me removed from first class because she didn't think I belonged there. She didn't know I owned the airline. Lisa's sharp intake of breath was audible. Oh, this is going to be good. I'm on it. Anything else? Schedule an emergency press conference for tomorrow morning, 10 a.m. Pacific. And reach out to our legal team. We're not suing anyone, we're implementing new industry-wide anti-discrimination protocols, and I want every major airline invited to participate. James, you're about to change the entire industry, aren't you? That's exactly what I'm about to do. As James entered the terminal, he spotted her immediately. Karen Mitchell stood at the baggage claim area, her phone pressed to her ear, her voice carrying across the crowded space. Completely unacceptable treatment. I've been a loyal customer for 10 years, and this is how I'm repaid? By being forced to sit in economy while some random person gets my seat? I'm telling you, David, I want legal action. I want that man identified in. She stopped mid-sentence as James walked directly past her. Their eyes met for a brief second. Recognition flickered across her face, recognition that the man she'd tried to humiliate was here, was confident, was somehow important in a way she hadn't understood. But James didn't stop. He didn't confront her. He simply walked past with Rebecca and Marcus flanking him like an entourage. Karen's voice dropped to a whisper. David, I'll call you back. The press conference. The next morning, the ballroom of the Century Plaza Hotel was packed with media. CNN, NBC, ABC, aviation industry publications, tech reporters, civil rights organizations, everyone had shown up when Horizon Airways announced an industry-changing policy initiative. James stood at the podium in a perfectly tailored navy suit, his presence commanding the room's attention. "Yesterday, I was nearly removed from a first-class seat on one of my own airline's flights," James began, his voice steady and clear. "A passenger demanded my removal because, in her words, I obviously didn't belong in first class. She questioned how I could afford the ticket. She suggested I had somehow gamed the system. And she insisted that passengers like her deserve to sit with their own kind." The room erupted with murmurs and camera clicks. This wasn't an isolated incident. It's a pattern that happens every single day in commercial aviation. Passengers of color are disproportionately questioned, moved, removed, and humiliated. And airlines have historically done nothing meaningful to address it. James clicked a remote, and the screen behind him filled with data, statistics on discrimination complaints, videos of similar incidents, testimony from dozens of passengers who'd experienced the same treatment. Today, Horizon Airways is announcing the industry's first comprehensive anti-discrimination protocol. It includes mandatory bias training for all staff, clear consequences for discriminatory behavior by passengers, transparent reporting mechanisms, and financial compensation for victims of discrimination. Another click. The screen showed partnerships with civil rights organizations, DOT oversight agreements, and commitments from 3 other airlines to adopt similar policies. But more importantly, I'm announcing the Dignity in Flight Initiative, a $50 million fund to support passengers who experience discrimination, to train airline personnel, and to lobby for federal regulations that make these protections mandatory across the industry. The reporters erupted with questions. "Mr. Carter, have you identified the passenger who tried to have you removed?" "I have. But I'm not interested in destroying her personally. I'm interested in destroying the systems that enabled her behavior." Will Skybridge Airlines face consequences? Skybridge has agreed to implement our protocols immediately and conduct a full review of their anti-discrimination policies. If they don't follow through, we'll terminate our code share agreement. What do you say to critics who might claim this is political correctness gone too far? James leaned into the microphone, his voice carrying absolute conviction. "I say that dignity isn't political. Respect isn't correctness. And if you think asking to be treated like a human being in a seat you paid for is too much to ask, then you're exactly the problem we're solving." The transformation. Within 48 hours, the story had gone viral. #DignityInFlight trended globally. Karen Mitchell's identity became public, not through James, but through other passengers who'd recognized her and shared their own stories of her behavior. She resigned from Thornton Consulting Group to focus on personal growth. Her husband's law firm issued a statement distancing themselves from her views. But James wasn't focused on her downfall. He was focused on systemic change. 5 major airlines adopted the anti-discrimination protocol within a month. Federal regulators announced new oversight measures. Flight attendant unions endorsed the changes enthusiastically. More importantly, passengers started speaking up. Videos of discrimination incidents were shared with #DignityInFlight hashtags. Airlines faced real consequences when they failed to act. 6 months later, reported discrimination incidents had dropped by 67% across participating airlines. The protocol worked. James stood in Horizon Airways headquarters, looking at a wall displaying letters from passengers who'd been protected by the new policies. Dozens of stories of people who'd been able to travel with dignity because one man had refused to accept humiliation as the price of flying. Rebecca Torres had become Horizon's chief diversity officer. Marcus Wellington had invested $20 million in the airline's expansion. Derek had left Skybridge to join Horizon Airways as a training specialist. The movement had grown far beyond one incident on one flight. The call to action. James recorded a video that Horizon Airways posted across all platforms. 6 months ago, I was almost removed from first class on my own airline because someone decided I didn't belong there. Today, I'm asking you a question. Have you witnessed discrimination and stayed silent? Have you been a victim and felt powerless? Have you been a bystander who wished you'd spoken up? He leaned forward, his eyes intense. Here's what I need you to do. If you witness discrimination, document it. Record it. Report it. Use the hashtag dignity in flight. Share your story. Airlines only change when we force them to change. If you work in the aviation industry, speak up. Protect passengers. Follow the protocols. Your silence enables the system. And if you're someone who's been told you don't belong somewhere, prove them wrong by succeeding so loudly they can't ignore you. Comment below with your commitment. Subscribe to follow our progress. Share this message with someone who needs to hear it. Because here's what I learned, you're not powerless. Your voice matters. And sometimes the person they try to remove from first class is exactly the person who'll change the entire industry. Your turn starts now. The screen faded to black, showing only text. Dr. James Carter didn't just fight back against one incident of discrimination, he transformed an entire industry. His story proves that strategic action creates more change than emotional reaction. That building systems is more powerful than seeking revenge. That true justice isn't about destroying your enemies, it's about creating a world where what happened to you can never happen to anyone else. What will you do when you witness injustice? Comment below. The movement continues with you.